love, in its purest form, is supposed to heal us. It's supposed to feel like home, safe, nurturing, eternal. Yet so often, it's the very thing that wounds us most deeply. We fall into arms that promise warmth, only to discover the fire burns. We stay in connections that hurt, convinced that pain is proof of passion. And we return, again and again, to the very people who fracture us, as if something sacred hides inside the suffering. Carl Jung once wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And nowhere is that more true than in love. Because love isn't just a matter of hearts. It's a map of the psyche. Every attraction, every heartbreak, every inexplicable pull toward someone who mirrors your deepest wounds, it all speaks the secret language of your unconscious. The people who hurt us are not random. They are reflections of the parts of ourselves we have not yet learned to face. They appear as if summoned, to make us conscious of what we've been unwilling to see. You see, Jung understood something most of us still resist. We don't fall for people as they are. We fall for what they awaken in us. Our longing for love often conceals a longing for wholeness, and we are magnetized not by comfort, but by the familiar echo of our own unresolved pain. It's as if the soul recognizes, in another's brokenness, the same fractures it carries within. And instead of running from the wound, it leans in, whispering, "Maybe this time I can finally heal." But love, when born from the unconscious, rarely heals. At least not at first. It repeats. It reopens. It reminds. We find ourselves in cycles that feel destined, drawn to the same type of person in different forms. The controlling partner. The emotionally unavailable one. The narcissist wrapped in charm. The caretaker who needs saving. Each encounter is not a new story, but the next chapter of an old one. The psyche's attempt to complete what was left unfinished. To rewrite the story of abandonment, rejection, or shame we first learned in childhood. Jung called this the process of individuation, the soul's lifelong journey toward integration. But before the light there is confrontation. And in love, confrontation often takes the form of heartbreak. Because nothing exposes the unconscious like intimacy. When you love, your defenses collapse. Your shadow, all that's hidden, denied, or repressed, rises to the surface. The partner becomes the mirror. And in that mirror, you see both your beauty and your brokenness. This is why the people who hurt us often feel like home. Not because they are right for us, but because they are familiar. The nervous system confuses comfort with recognition, and so it pulls us toward what it knows, even if what it knows is pain. We don't realize that what feels like chemistry is often the spark of a wound meeting its reflection. But Jung never saw this as a curse. He saw it as a sacred invitation. A signal from the unconscious saying, "Look here. This is where you still bleed." Because love that wounds is not merely tragedy, it's initiation. It's the psyche's way of forcing growth through pain. When the heart shatters, it breaks open the very walls that kept the unconscious sealed. So perhaps the real tragedy isn't that we fall for those who hurt us, but that we mistake the lesson for love itself. We think we are meant to stay, when in truth, we were meant to awaken. To see the wound clearly, to integrate what it reveals, and to rise from it not bitter, but whole. The truth is, every soul must walk through the fire of illusion before it learns what love truly is. And in that fire, the masks burn away. What remains, if we're brave enough to face it, is something purer than romantic fantasy. It is the love that begins not with another, but with the self. Reason 1. The shadow in attraction, how the wound chooses who we love. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Few places reveal this truth more clearly than in love, especially the kind that hurt. We like to believe attraction is a matter of preference, chemistry, or destiny. But beneath the surface of every type we chase lies a story written by our wounds. It is not the conscious self that falls in love, it is the wounded self that seeks resolution. and the people we fall for are often the mirrors of that wound. In Jungian terms, this is the work of the shadow, the part of us we repress, deny, or refuse to see. When we meet someone who embodies those hidden traits, the shadow stirs. Something ancient and magnetic awakens. We feel drawn, sometimes against reason. The heart races not because this person is right for us, but because they hold a key to a locked room inside our psyche. You see, love is not always about affection. Often, it's about recognition. We are unconsciously drawn to people who reflect the parts of us we've buried, our unmet needs, our unexpressed rage, our unhealed shame. The attraction feels divine because, in a way, it is. The soul is trying to complete a circle, to integrate what has been lost. Jung called this the projection of the shadow. When we fall for someone, we project not only our ideals onto them, but our darkness too. They become both the dream and the threat, a figure capable of fulfilling our deepest desire or reenacting our oldest pain. And this is why we often mistake emotional intensity for love. We think, I feel so much around this person, it must be fate. But what we really feel is the collision of our conscious self with our unconscious wounds. This is why the people who hurt us often feel familiar. It's not because we like pain, it's because pain is known. The mind clings to what it recognizes, even when it destroys us. If you grew up unseen, you may fall for those who overlook you, trying to rewrite that original story. If you grew up in chaos, you may crave those who keep you anxious, mistaking adrenaline for affection. If love once came with conditions, you may find comfort in those who make you earn it again. Each heartbreak, then, is not a failure, but a message from the shadow, whispering, "This pattern will repeat until you bring it into the light." Jung taught that love has two faces, one that comforts and one that confronts. The second kind, the confronting kind, is the one that burns through illusions. It is the kind that shows us who we really are and what we truly fear. And in that sense, the ones who hurt us are not always villains. They are catalysts. They awaken the unconscious. They show us the very wound we were meant to heal. But here lies the danger. If we stay asleep to this process, we keep circling the same lessons with different faces. We call it bad luck, toxic love, or destiny, when in truth it is repetition without reflection. And the only way out is awareness. To pause, to ask, why does this dynamic feel familiar? What in me is being relived here? When you start seeing love not as something that happens to you, but something that arises from you, your power returns. You stop chasing validation and start seeking understanding. You stop seeking completion in another and begin the sacred work of integration, of reuniting with your shadow, of becoming whole. Because the truth is, the heart doesn't just want to be loved. It wants to be seen by you. And sometimes, the people who hurt us are the ones who finally force us to look in that mirror. Reason 2. The mirror of the anima and animus. Why we love our inner opposite. Carl Jung believed that within every man lives an anima, the feminine aspect of his soul, and within every woman, an animus, the masculine counterpart within her unconscious. These aren't mere gendered archetypes, but energies, the inner balance of logic and emotion, strength and sensitivity, assertiveness and surrender, reason and intuition. But here's the paradox. What we repress within ourselves, we seek in another. And that search often becomes the root of our most passionate and most painful relationship. When Jung said that each man carries a woman within, he was describing more than an idea. He was describing the inner magnetism of the psyche. The anima and animus aren't just psychological concepts. They are bridges between our conscious and unconscious worlds. They are the unseen architects of attraction. The anima, in Jung's words, is the man's soul image. She appears in dreams, fantasies, and projections. She is the voice that whispers in intuition, the muse behind art, the emotional compass he often denies. The animus, meanwhile, lives in a woman's depths as her inner voice of reason, courage, and spiritual direction, though when distorted, He can become critical, domineering, or cold. And here's where love becomes both mystical and dangerous. When we meet someone who embodies the qualities of our inner opposite, the anima or animus, the psyche recognizes them instantly. They feel familiar, magnetic, otherworldly. It's not love at first sight, it's recognition. The unconscious says, "There you are, the part of me I've been missing." But the problem arises when we don't realize what's happening. Instead of integrating these inner energies, we project them outward. We fall in love not with the person as they are, but with the part of ourselves we've lost. The man falls for the woman who seems to embody his anima, tender, creative, spiritual, but in time, she becomes human, imperfect, and no longer fits the projection. The love fades, the disappointment sets in. The woman falls for the man who seems to embody her animus, strong, confident, purposeful, but soon finds that he too carries weakness, fear, and shadow. And so we say, they changed. But in truth, they didn't change, the projection dissolved. Jung warned that this process, though painful, is sacred. Every projection must one day be withdrawn. Only then can true love begin. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When our anima or animus projection lands on another, that relationship becomes an initiation. It draws us inward, forcing us to reconcile what we've disowned. The heartbreak, the disillusionment, the intensity, all of it is alchemical. We are being invited to integrate what we sought outside." This is why Jung saw love as one of the most dangerous, yet transformative forces in existence. Because love pulls us toward wholeness, even if it must do so through pain. The person who awakens our anima or animus isn't just a partner. They are an initiator. They bring us face to face with our own soul. And yet, most people never see this process consciously. They remain trapped in a loop of projection, idealization, disappointment, withdrawal, always chasing the lost part of themselves in someone new. This is why, Jung observed, many of us are not seeking partners, we are seeking mirrors. We fall in love with what we long to integrate, and when that illusion breaks, so does the relationship. But when you begin to see this cycle for what it truly is, a dialogue between your conscious and unconscious, something miraculous happens. You no longer seek salvation in another. You begin to balance your own inner energies. The man learns to listen to his intuition and tenderness. The woman learns to honor her inner authority and assertiveness. And love, at last, becomes not dependency, but union. Because in Jung's view, love was never about completion. It was about reflection. The other person isn't your missing half. They are the mirror showing you the half you have yet to embrace. So when you fall for someone who awakens both your highest longing and your deepest ache, don't rush to label it as failure or fate. See it for what it truly is, an invitation from the unconscious, a call to integrate your inner opposite, to bring balance where there was separation, and to become the wholeness you've been searching for all along. Because, as Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And love, even painful love, is often the fire through which that privilege is earned. Reason 3. The repetition compulsion, why we return to the same pain in different faces. Carl Jung once observed that, what you resist not only persists but grows in size. And nowhere does this ring truer than in the realm of love, where the same wounds reappear, wearing new faces, speaking new words, but carrying the same ache. We think we've moved on. We think the last heartbreak taught us everything we needed to know. And yet, somehow, we find ourselves standing in the same emotional storm again, just with a different name attached to it. This is what Jung called a psychic repetition, what modern psychology calls the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate unresolved emotional situations in hopes of mastering them this time. It's not madness. It's the soul's desperate attempt to heal. When the psyche is wounded, especially in childhood, it doesn't just store memories. It stores emotional patterns. If love once came tangled with abandonment, rejection, or neglect, the unconscious associates those experiences with love itself. And so, without realizing it, we keep seeking familiarity over fulfillment. We return to the same dynamics, the same emotional textures, as if drawn by invisible threads. Jung explained that this happens because the unconscious seeks integration. It repeats what is unhealed, not to torture us, but to bring it into awareness. Every painful repetition is a new opportunity for consciousness to evolve. But most of us never recognize it as such. We call it bad luck, toxic patterns, or fate. Yet fate, Jung said, is simply what happens when we refuse to face ourselves. Think of the person who continually falls for emotionally unavailable partners. Each time, the story starts with intensity, the spark, the fantasy, the feeling of, this time it's different. But the ending is always the same: the distance, the silence, the ache of not being chosen. The truth is, they are not chasing love. They are chasing resolution. They are unconsciously trying to rewrite the original wound, perhaps from a parent who was present in body but absent in affection. But love cannot rewrite history. It can only illuminate it. Until we become conscious of the pattern, the psyche will keep looping the same lesson, louder each time, until we finally see it for what it is. It's not the people who are repeating. It's the pain trying to be integrated. Jung described this as the circle of transformation, where suffering continues until consciousness dawns. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. And nowhere does consciousness come harder, or hurt more, than when it shatters our illusions about love." You see, the heart is both student and teacher. It returns to the same classroom, not because it enjoys the lessons, but because it hasn't yet learned them. Each failed relationship is not proof of weakness. It is evidence of persistence. The soul is trying, again and again, to find healing in the familiar. The tragedy is not that we repeat. The tragedy is that we repeat without reflection. But the moment you stop and ask, what am I re-experiencing here? What does this pain remind me of? The pattern begins to dissolve. Awareness is the solvent of fate. Once you see the cycle, you are no longer a prisoner of it. You realize that what you keep calling your type is really your trauma seeking resolution. And that realization changes everything. Because then, you no longer choose from the wound, you choose from wisdom. Jung's great insight was that the psyche does not punish. It tries to complete itself. It sends the same pain again and again, not as cruelty, but as a signal. You are ready now. You can handle the truth this time. And the truth is this: until you sit with the original wound, until you stop chasing love as a way to fill it, you will keep meeting it in others. But once you face it, the spell breaks. The same kind of person stops attracting you. The drama loses its taste. Peace starts to feel safer than chaos. And that is the sign that healing has begun. Because the repetition compulsion isn't a curse. It's a curriculum. Each heartbreak is another chapter in the soul's education. Each ending, another reminder that love's truest purpose is not to make us comfortable, but to make us conscious. And in that awakening, we find something far more powerful than the thrill of falling in love. We find the strength of staying awake in love. Reason 4. The illusion of redemption, when love becomes a search for salvation. There's a dangerous beauty in believing that love can save us. It begins innocently enough, a quiet yearning to be understood, to be healed by someone's presence. But beneath that longing often hides a deeper wound, the belief that redemption lies outside of us. For the empath, love becomes more than affection, it becomes a mission. They see the broken soul and feel destiny calling. They want to rescue, repair, and resurrect. But in doing so, they begin to lose the boundary between compassion and self-erasure. Carl Jung warned of this subtle trap, the projection of our own shadow onto the other. We see in them the parts of ourselves we've abandoned. The narcissist, in particular, reflects this dynamic perfectly. They mirror the empath's longing for wholeness, but feed on it instead. To love someone hoping they will save you is to unknowingly hand them the script of your undoing. The empath's tragedy is not that they love too much. It's that they believe love alone will redeem what is unredeemable. They confuse mercy with healing, endurance with transformation. But love is not meant to be a crucifixion. It is not meant to be proof of one's goodness or pain tolerance. It is meant to be a meeting of two conscious souls, not the salvation of one unconscious one. Only when the empath withdraws their search for salvation from the other, do they begin to glimpse true redemption, not through love given, but through love reclaimed. Reason 5. The breaking point, when compassion turns into fury. There comes a moment, silent, almost imperceptible at first, when something inside you shifts. You've forgiven too many times, explained too many times, believed too many times, and suddenly, without warning, you're just done. Not angry, not heartbroken, just empty. That's the breaking point, the quiet moment when your soul decides it's had enough. Carl Jung once said that, what you resist persists. And many of us in these painful cycles of love resist one truth more than any other, the realization that love cannot coexist with self-betrayal. For the empathic, patient, endlessly understanding soul, this is the hardest lesson to learn. You've built your identity around compassion. You understand others, you see them, you forgive them. But somewhere in that process you've stopped seeing yourself. And so, the universe delivers a paradox. The more you love someone who hurts you, the more you start to lose the part of you that made that love pure in the first place. The threshold of emotional exhaustion. At first, you rationalize the pain. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe you're overreacting. But over time, maybe becomes a mantra of denial, a way to keep the story alive when the evidence is long gone. Jung would call this psychic exhaustion, when the conscious mind becomes overwhelmed by its own repression. You've buried so many disappointments, excused so much disrespect, that your psyche begins to rebel. You start feeling bursts of anger, even rage, not because you've suddenly become bitter, but because your inner self is fighting to survive. That fury isn't hatred, it's self-preservation disguised as anger. The empath who once whispered, "They didn't mean to hurt me," starts to hear another voice, quiet but steady, saying, "But you didn't deserve to be hurt." That voice is the return of the self, the part Jung believed we spend our lives trying to integrate. It's the reclaiming of dignity after a long spiritual sleep. The shadow fights back. Jung's concept of the shadow, the hidden, repressed aspects of the psyche, comes to life vividly here. For months, maybe years, you've suppressed your darker emotions. Resentment, anger, disappointment, boundaries. You told yourself they weren't spiritual, that you were above them. But the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits, and when the pain becomes unbearable, it erupts, often as sudden, uncontrollable anger. This is why, after long periods of tolerance, empaths often explode. They reach a point where silence becomes poison. Their love, once gentle, now trembles with rage. It's not madness, it's balance being restored. The psyche, Jung said, strives for wholeness, not perfection. And wholeness requires that every repressed truth finally be seen. When you lash out, when your compassion curdles into fury, you're not becoming your opposite, you're finally meeting your full self. The shadow steps forward, demanding to be acknowledged. You have suffered enough. Now let me speak. The alchemy of anger. Anger has long been misjudged as a destructive force, but Jung understood it as a transformative one, a fire that burns away illusion. In the context of toxic love, anger is not cruelty, it's clarity. It cuts through the stories you've told yourself, the excuses, the false hope. Anger is the moment the fog lifts and you see things as they are. It's your soul's immune response to emotional infection. And once that fire ignites, the old spell of attachment begins to break. The narcissist's manipulation loses power. The empath's guilt begins to fade. What remains is pain, yes, but also truth. That's why, after the breaking point, people often describe feeling strangely peaceful. They don't want revenge. They don't even want closure. They just want distance, silence, a clean sky after a long storm. That's not indifference, it's evolution. Because love that was once driven by fear of loss becomes replaced by love for self. And that, Jung would say, is when individuation truly begins. The moment you stop defining yourself through another and begin integrating all that you are. The return to the self. In the early stages of love, especially one steeped in pain, we often mistake devotion for depth. We think, the more I endure, the more it means. But endurance is not proof of love. It's often a symptom of abandonment. When you reach your breaking point, you're not giving up on love. You're giving up on illusion. You're letting go of the fantasy that your suffering could somehow redeem someone else. Jung described individuation as the process by which a person becomes who they truly are. And ironically, it's often heartbreak that triggers it. The empath who once absorbed everyone else's pain begins to turn inward. They start asking questions they've long avoided. Why do I think I need to fix others to feel worthy? Why does love always feel like a battlefield? Who am I when I'm not saving anyone? Those questions are not signs of despair. They're the beginning of rebirth. When compassion evolves, compassion, at its highest form, is not self-erasure, it's self-awareness. It's understanding that you can love someone deeply and still walk away. That you can wish them healing without becoming their cure. That you can forgive them without reopening the wound. The breaking point, painful as it is, becomes a sacred initiation. It's the threshold where empathy transforms from a form of martyrdom into a form of mastery. Because once you've loved someone who hurt you and survived, truly survived, your love becomes wiser. It's no longer a desperate search for belonging. It's an act of recognition. You start to see love not as a rescue mission, but as a reflection of mutual wholeness. You realize that you were never meant to save anyone. You were meant to see through them, to see what they awakened in you, heal it, and evolve beyond it. That is the soul's final act of defiance, and its greatest liberation. Because in the end, the empath doesn't become cold. They become conscious. Love, wounds, and awakening. In the end, we don't fall for the people who hurt us because we're weak. We fall because we're searching. For reflection. For healing. For the parts of ourselves we've long buried. Carl Jung taught that what we meet in others is what lies dormant within us. The toxic, the tender, the broken. Each one becomes a mirror. And sometimes it takes being shattered by love to finally see the truth staring back. The journey of the empath, the lover, the seeker, is not about avoiding pain. It's about learning to transform it, to let every wound become a teacher, every heartbreak a step toward self-knowledge. Because one day, the same heart that once clung to the wrong people learns to choose peace over chaos, solitude over desperation, and truth over fantasy. And in that moment, you realize you never needed saving. You were simply remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. That, Jung would say, is the ultimate act of love, to turn suffering into wisdom and to finally come home to yourself.